Welcome to NFL Nexus, your home for the deepest of deep dive football analysis. Today, we are exploring a story that is just, well, it's a shocker. It's a cautionary tale, a speculative look at how a can't-miss quarterback prospect and a desperate franchise can see their dreams completely unravel into an absolute nightmare. Now, before we get into the story, if you're into this kind of detailed football analysis, the stuff that goes way beyond the basic box score, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and get ready to drop a comment below. All right, let's dive into the stunning downfall of a franchise QB. So here's the roadmap for today's deep dive. We're going to start with the shocking climax of the story, the moment the Colts decided to move on at the 2026 Combine. Then we have to rewind the clock, right? We have to go back and understand what made this prospect so incredibly electrifying in the first place. From there, we'll chart the slow, painful derailment, looking at the stats and the key moments where promise just fizzled out into disappointment. We'll pinpoint that exact moment, the point of no return for the franchise. Then get into the messy details, the money, the trade market, what happens next. And finally, we'll zoom out and look at the huge cautionary tale this story tells every single front office in the NFL. It's a lot to unpack, so let's get into it. All right, so I want you to picture this. The date is February 26th, 2026. The entire NFL world has descended upon Indianapolis for the annual scouting combine. You know the scene. Everyone's buzzing about the next wave of talent. Who's running the fastest 40, who's acing the interviews, all that. But the biggest story, the one setting off every phone in the city, isn't about some college kid. No. This one is an absolute earthquake coming from inside the home team's building, the Indianapolis Colts. And there it is, the bombshell, dropped by NFL Network's Cameron Wolfe. And look, this isn't just some rumor. It's not late-night speculation. It's being reported as a mutual agreement. The Colts and Anthony Richardson are parting ways. Think about that for a second. Less than 3 years, he hasn't even finished his rookie contract. This is the guy they picked 4th overall, the guy they anointed as the savior of the franchise. He was supposed to be the face of the Colts for the next decade, maybe more. And now, it's over. It is an absolutely stunning, brutal, and incredibly swift fall from grace. So that's the question, isn't it? That's what every single person is asking. How on earth does this happen? You have a player with a combination of talent that you almost never see. The size, the cannon of an arm, the elite athleticism. A guy your organization bet its entire future on. And just like that, he's being shopped around for, let's be honest, probably pennies on the dollar. It just doesn't seem real. To understand this complete and total collapse, we have to go back. We have to rewind the tape to the very beginning, back when the hype was at an absolute fever pitch and his potential felt completely limitless. Let's travel back to the spring of 2023. At that point, the Indianapolis Colts were completely lost. They were wandering in the quarterback desert and had been ever since Andrew Luck's shocking retirement. They tried everything, right? They had the veteran carousel. Phillip Rivers came in, gave them one good year, but he was just a stopgap. Then they traded for Carson Wentz, which we all know how that ended, a total disaster. They followed that up by bringing in Matt Ryan, and that was somehow even worse. They were stuck in NFL purgatory, the absolute worst place to be. But then, with the 4th pick in the draft, they saw him. They saw their way out. They saw their salvation in a prospect unlike anyone else. Anthony Richardson, he wasn't just a quarterback prospect. He was a physical marvel. You remember his combine performance, right? It was the stuff of legend. He set records for a QB in the vertical jump, the broad jump. He had a rocket launcher for an arm attached to a 244-pound frame that could run a 4.43 40. I mean, come on. He was a human cheat code, a player who looked like he was built in a video game lob. The Colts didn't just draft a player that day. They invested in an idea. The idea that they could take this unbelievable ball of raw clay and mold him, shape him into their next superstar, their next Peyton Manning or Andrew Luck. And that number right there, $34 million, that's the proof. That's the tangible evidence of just how much they believed in him. A fully guaranteed rookie contract. That's the team pushing all its chips into the middle of the table, telling the entire world, this is our guy. Anthony Richardson is the face, the present, and the future of the Indianapolis Colts. And you have to understand the immense weight of expectation that comes with that draft position and that kind of money. Not just from inside the building, but from a whole city, a fan base that was starving for a true leader. He wasn't just supposed to be good, he was supposed to be the one. But as we've seen happen so many times in the brutal, unforgiving world of the NFL, the promise you see on a Saturday afternoon doesn't always show up on a Sunday. And sure, The flashes were there, of course they were. The incredible runs where he looked like an unstoppable force of nature. The jaw-dropping throws that would travel 60 yards down the field on a frozen rope. But that's all they were, flashes. His time in Indianapolis wouldn't be defined by those highlight reel moments. No, it would be defined by crushing inconsistency, by devastating injuries, and by the routine missed throws that just killed drive after drive and broke the offense's back. This timeline, it's a step-by-step map of the slow, painful erosion of his standing in that building. It's just a series of escalating red flags. Think about this. To be benched midway through your second year as a top 5 pick, that is a massive, massive blow. It's basically a public vote of no confidence from the coaching staff. And then you have the unbelievably bad luck of a season-ending injury, not from a big hit in a game, but a fractured orbital bone in warm-ups, a freak accident. It all just adds up. Over 3 seasons, he plays in just 17 games, only 15 starts. You just can't develop as a quarterback from the trainer's room. And when he was on the field, well, the stats paint an even darker picture. Look, these are not just numbers on a stat sheet. They're the vital signs of a quarterback whose development has completely flatlined. A career completion percentage barely over 50% is a death sentence in today's NFL. It means half the time you drop back to pass, the play ends with the ball on the ground, or even worse, in the hands of the other team. It kills your offense, it destroys team morale, and it puts your defense in impossible spots over and over again. And that TD to interception ratio, more picks than touchdowns, confirms it. He was giving the ball away more often than he was scoring. That disastrous 47.7% in 2024, that was it. That was the final straw. No team can win with that kind of chronic inaccuracy from the most important position on the field, period. And this right here, this slide just perfectly lays out the massive, gaping chasm between the dream the Colts drafted and the reality that showed up on Sundays. On the left, you have the prospect, the limitless potential, the rare physical gifts, the hope of an entire franchise. That's the guy from the YouTube highlight reels. And on the right, you have the pro. The crippling inaccuracy, the turnovers, the wild inconsistency, and now a trade commodity. The potential, for all those reasons we've talked about, it never bridged the gap. The tools were all there, but the craftsman just never fully emerged.
You know, in every story like this, every draft bust, there's a clear turning point. It's usually not just one play, but a decision. A moment where the hope and patience that an organization has on draft day finally just cracks and shatters into a million pieces. For Anthony Richardson and the Indianapolis Colts, that moment of truth, that point of no return, came right in the middle of the 2024 season.
This was the knockout punch. There is simply no way to spin these numbers in a positive light. When you're the league's worst quarterback in a fundamental stat like completion percentage, and at the same time you're giving the ball away at an alarming rate, you're in a death spiral. So the decision to pull him, to bench him for a veteran journeyman like Joe Flacco, it was so much more than just a lineup change. It was a public announcement from the coaches and the front office. It was them saying, we've lost confidence. We cannot win games with him right now. The experiment has failed. And that benching created a vacuum. It opened the door for somebody else to step up and grab the job. So in 2025, the Colts brought in Daniel Jones. And he didn't just play okay. He stabilized the entire offense. He played well enough to completely reshape the team's future at the position. He established himself as the clear, reliable starter. So much so that the team is ready to use the transition tag on him. And behind him, a rookie, Riley Leonard, got one start in Week 18 and showed enough poise to be seen as a good developing backup. And just like that, Richardson went from franchise savior to QB1 to struggling starter to QB3. The writing wasn't just on the wall, it was in giant, bold letters. There was no viable path back to the field for him in Indianapolis. This is what makes the politics of the NFL so fascinating to me. At the Combine, literally days before the trade news breaks, GM Chris Ballard stands at that podium and he plays the part. He gives the public vote of confidence. He talks up Richardson's character, his work ethic, his youth. He says all the right things you're supposed to say, trying to protect his players' trade value and project an image of patience to the rest of the league. It's a masterclass in what we call GM speak. But here's the thing. Actions always, and I mean always, speak louder than words in the NFL. Just a couple of days after that public show of support, the real work was being done behind closed doors. The team met with Richardson's agent and the so-called mutual decision was made. That public praise was just a smokescreen, a necessary facade for the private reality, which was that the relationship was broken beyond repair. The trust was gone, and it was time for everyone to get a fresh start. So the decision's made. Richardson's time as a Colt is over. But how does a high-profile divorce like this actually go down? It's not as simple as just cutting a guy.
Not when he's a former top pick with millions in guaranteed money still on the books. So let's break down the complicated financials, the game of leverage being played between the Colts and 31 other teams, and what the future might look like for a 23-year-old kid who desperately needs a change of scenery. Okay, let's look at the money, because the money is driving all of this. For the 2026 season, Richardson has a cap hit of over $10.8 million. Now, if the Colts can trade him, they can save about $5.4 million of that, which is pretty significant. But here's the key detail, the number that really puts a clock on this whole thing. That roster bonus of over $4.2 million. It's due in August. That bonus is a hard deadline. The Colts are going to be extremely motivated to get a deal done before they have to write that check, and that gives every other team a huge piece of leverage in these talks.
The biggest issue for the Colts here is leverage, or more accurately, their complete and total lack of it. Every other GM in the league knows the situation. They know he was demoted to third string. They know the relationship is fractured. They know the Colts have to make a move before that roster bonus comes due. Because of all that, Indianapolis is negotiating from a place of extreme weakness. The dream of getting a first-round pick back, that's long gone. The painful truth is they will be lucky to get a third or fourth-round pick in return. And that is just a brutal pill to swallow for a guy who took fourth overall. But on the flip side, what's a disaster for the Colts is a golden opportunity for another team. It's the ultimate low-risk, high-reward move. For the price of a mid-round pick, a team can take a flyer on a 23-year-old with truly world-class physical tools. A team like Minnesota is a great example. We know their head coach, Kevin O'Connell, reportedly loved him coming out of the draft. The Rams, their GM, Les Snead, has never been afraid to trade for high-profile reclamation projects. And Green Bay, well, they have a fantastic history of developing quarterbacks behind an established veteran. There will absolutely be teams lining up, willing to bet that they're the ones who can succeed where the Colts failed.
Okay, so let's zoom out. Let's get away from the nitty-gritty of this one player and look at the 30,000-foot view. This whole saga, even though it's a hypothetical story, it serves as an incredibly powerful and relevant lesson for every single front office in the NFL. This is a classic case study in risk, reward, and the incredibly dangerous game of team building in a league that is obsessed with the quarterback position.
This is the textbook definition of a cautionary tale. The Colts fell in love with the ceiling. They saw the unbelievable physical upside, the arm strength, the speed, the size, and they gambled. They bet that their coaches could fix the flaws and develop a very raw prospect into a polished pro. But instead, they paid an incredibly steep price in the form of lost seasons, a wasted top 5 pick, and millions of dollars in resources that could have been spent making the rest of the team better. It's a high-stakes mistake, but one that teams make over and over again in that desperate search for a superstar. And you know, this wasn't just a one-off gamble. When you really dig into the Colts' track record under GM Chris Ballard, you see a pattern. It's a pattern of calculated risks, some of which paid off beautifully and others that blew up in their faces. On the one hand, you have fantastic value signings like Justin Houston, or veteran quarterbacks like Phillip Rivers and Daniel Jones, who gave them crucial stability. But on the other hand, you have some major misfires. Signing corner Xavier Howard, who retired a month later. Giving kicker Matt Gay the biggest contract ever at the time only to cut him. It shows a clear philosophy of swinging for the fences, which, yeah, it can lead to home runs, but it can also lead to costly, franchise-altering strikeouts, like this one. And really, this whole history of hits and misses just hammers home the risk that is baked into every single decision a GM makes, whether it's for a backup defensive tackle or a franchise quarterback. And that brings us to the ultimate question, the core debate that this cautionary tale leaves us with. In a league so desperate for elite quarterback play, is it better to gamble on a prospect with a sky-high MVP-level ceiling, but who also has a terrifyingly low, franchise-crippling floor? Or is the smarter move to take the safer player, the guy with a higher floor but maybe a lower ceiling? The Colts, in this story, they bet big on the ceiling, and they crashed right through the floor, setting the franchise back for years. So, what do you think? Is chasing that raw, athletic upside worth the massive risk? Or should teams prioritize polish and pro readiness above all else? Let us know your team-building philosophy down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please subscribe to NFL Nexus and smash that like button. It really does help us grow the channel. And hey, if you're looking for another way to support what we do here, don't forget to check out our coloring books. They're perfect for fans of all ages, for your kids, your grandkids, or even for yourself. You can use the QR code on your screen right now or find the link down in the description. Thanks for watching.